Thank you for the invitation, and I'm very pleased to be here. I'm very pleased to be a member of Chambers as well, actually. I knew nothing about Chambers until I joined, and it's like opening the door onto this magic world. There's so much happening and there's so much interesting stuff, and I'm really pleased to be a member. So I'll tell you a bit about me and a little bit about storytelling, and we're a relatively small group, which is great because we can be able to do some low impact, interactive, friendly storytelling stuff. And then I thought we'd finish with a Q&A where you can hit me with any questions and I will try and answer as sensibly as I possibly can. And I'll also give you a couple of recommendations of names and publications to follow up if you feel that storytelling is for you. So about me. So I am a full-time professional storyteller. I have been working in storytelling for 25 years. I have worked a lot in education, both working with children and helping them with literacy and also training teachers. I also have worked at the University of South Wales, where I've lectured undergraduates, and I tour internationally, both as a performer on my own and with a company called Adverse Camber, a production company. And I teach workshops, and I teach from wherever I've been, Ireland to Hong Kong, Sweden to Morocco, Brazil, North, South America. So I've been around and I've done quite a lot. And it all started 25 years ago. And now, of course, we've had a year of absolutely no face-to-face stuff. So I've had to do a bit of reinvention. But I do want to tell you about how it all started, actually, because I was 25 years ago, last summer, in a festival. It was the first ever Beyond the Border festival, which is a great festival, which I can thoroughly recommend. And it used to take place in St. Donat's Castle. Has anyone been to St. Donat's Castle? It's otherwise known as Atlantic College. It's a beautiful place. It was a ruined castle. And then 100 or so years ago, along came, well, actually more, along came William Randolph Hearst, bought it. Then he went all over Europe and he got all the bits that were missing and made a complete castle. And that's where the festival happens. And it was absolutely stunning. I'd never seen anything like it. There were all these beautiful walled gardens and these beautiful castle features, and then a jousting field down the bottom where there was a forest on one side, a church at the other, full of these big tents for performances, tents for tea and coffee and food and everything else. And at the end of the festival, there was the finale. So I went into this one tent, this green and red striped big top. We all went in, sat down, and I had no idea about storytelling. This is my first event I'd ever been to. I didn't realize that the guy who was going to come on was like the top man. Anyway, this man comes on, and he's about my height, maybe a little bit taller, very serious, and extremely French. So everyone else who'd come on had done the kind of like, hi, I like you if you like me kind of interaction, but not him. No. He comes onto the stage and he says, I'm going to tell you a story, but it's long. 45 minutes long, maybe longer than you want. If that's too long, please go. If you stay for the whole story. Understood? We'd never been talked to like this before, but do you know what? Everyone stayed. And then this man who's called Abby Patricks, who I've known and worked with many times since then, he came to the front of the stage and he launched into this amazing Norwegian story about trolls and the strangest things you can possibly imagine. And it blew me away. I'd never seen anything like it, never heard anything like it. And when I walked out of, it was quite magical actually, because when I walked out of the tent, it was then dark and also the fog had come down. So there's a foghorn blaring in the background and it was a real pea super. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. So I stumbled through the fog. I didn't know where I was going, but I did know one thing. And it was that I was now a storyteller. That's what I had to do. So that's a bit of my story. The eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed I gave you two introductions. There was the first one, which was facts. And it was fine. It was good. It told you what you needed to know. It's kind of my CV. And then there was the second one, which wasn't. Well, it was factual in as much as it was based on truth, but it was not about facts. It was about experience. It was, of course, a story. Both modes are important, valid, and useful. But I have a question for you, and it is this: what's the difference for you between how these two modes affected you? If you've got an idea, give me a wave. You want to say, you don't have to, yay, Steve, cheers.
Your CV thing is all what we all go, blah, 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 blah. And then when you said about the French guy, all I thought was, hello, hello, I'm going to listen to that. So yes. Probably not the right answer, but there we go.
No, Steve, it's a really, really good answer. Yeah. I mean, if I can praise you what you said, it was blah, blah, blah. Hello, hello, I'm going to listen to this.
Yeah, but in the accent of the TV series.
Well, yes, of course, obviously. I mean, we couldn't pass up the opportunity for a bit of panto, could we? I mean, either of us. No. So, who had their hand? Was that Andrew? No, yeah, Andrew.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, there's a cynical saying in the world of journalism.
Sorry, Andrew, can we come back to you? I think. Sorry about that. Peter was in mid-flow.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And we cut him off, which is painful. Sorry, Peter, carry on.
No, I was just going to say really pretty much what Steve said. The second story was obviously a second story and much more engaging than the first one, which was just this is me, this is what I've done.
Yeah, exactly.
You pulled us in with a story. And we thought, oh, yeah.
Great. And Peter, what's the impact on you as a listener?
Well, so much more engaging. I wanted to listen. I wanted to know what was going to happen next.
Ah, there we are.
I was in.
Yes, you're in. Yes, these are such interesting observations. Because in the first one, you're in, which means in the other one, you were out. Mm. And I don't want to say that storytelling is better than facts. Sometimes you absolutely need the facts, clear, crystal clear. But there's a different connection that we have. Andrew, you were in mid-flow as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut over you, Peter. There's a cynical saying in the world of journalism that is you should never let facts get in the way of a good story.
Quite
it's
right.
Totally untrue, but the point of it is that a story engages people in a way that facts don't always.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks, Andrew. That's a really, really good observation. Anyone else? I mean, it's completely personal. So, yes, Stephanie.
Yeah, I thought the way that you told the story made it more memorable as well. So I'm more likely to go away and say, heard the story from Michael earlier, and he listened to this French guy say the story. Blah, blah, blah. Whereas if you went off your CV, I probably wouldn't remember it as much.
Okay. Yeah, and the other thing is that it's because it's experience. Something else happens as well. Stephanie, can I ask you some questions about the story? Mm-hmm. This is not a memory test. This is not a memory test. I'm not asking you to remember anything. Okay. So do you remember the bit when I went into the tent and sat down?
Yeah.
Okay. Could you pop yourself in the tent as well?
Yeah.
Okay. What's there? Can you tell me what's in front of you?
Just more seats with more people and a stage in front of me.
Stephanie, what are the seats made of?
Well, originally they were it was more like a circus tent, so it was more like benches, actually.
Okay, tell me about the benches.
Just wooden benches with no backs to them, really.
Amazing. That's exactly what was there, and I can't quite believe this is exactly what was there. Yeah. And so, is there any kind of backdrop or staging or anything like that?
Well, I just thought there was a stage that was a bit of a step up from the ground with like spotlights on for somebody to walk onto.
Steph, you went there by any chance, were you?
No, I really was not there. I've never been to that festival.
You would have been about 3 had you been there. Now, this is really, really interesting. And did you see what Stephanie did when I asked her the questions? Did you see what she did with her face? She went there. You could see her eyes going into the environment. So she recreated her experience. Now, I'm so pleased you appear to be completely telepathic, but it is it is amazing that we fill in the, did you know that there were benches there before I asked the question?
No.
So we're dealing with something quite mysterious. So there seems to be two levels happening here. There's what you think you know, and then there's all the other stuff where you just need to ask the question and the information appears. You didn't make it up, did you, Stephanie? You didn't invent it. You said, oh, well, I'll keep them happy, I'll say benches.
Well, yeah, well, I think when you said chairs, I knew that it wasn't chairs, it was benches. So I had to change.
That's amazing. It's just, so there is, I don't want to get too woo-woo about the whole thing, but there is something strange and alchemical and quantum happening when we do this work. And this is part of the added hidden value that we have, because not only is it true about the seeing and the hearing and the sensation world of the story, when you start telling stories in an organization or a community, everyone's imagination can link up in that way, and you get really something quite strong. Thank you, Stephanie. Anyone else got any observations about that or comments? Have you all realized that was actually the second story of our session? Peter told a story earlier on about the watch. And not only did you tell the story, Peter, you also used one of the storytelling modes. Well, two actually. You used information quite a lot because you had to get quite a lot of information over, and you did dialogue. You took on the point of view of yourself and the guy with the watch in your story. You would do, I'm exaggerating now, all right? You did kind of this kind of thing. And you must, I mean, that, the really interesting thing is, and the good news is, that our storytelling ability is innate. Well, no, it's not quite innate. We've learned it. We are the storytelling animal, which is one of the things you'll hear all the time about storytelling. But we learn it through our normal social activity to the extent that we don't even know we're doing it. So I'm sure many of you here have been round a kitchen table or in a pub, and you know when a group goes, well, particularly with families where the same stories get told over and over again. There's a moment when it's not conversation anymore. It's a different activity. So for example, if someone is telling a story, it's really rude to interrupt. Really rude. You wouldn't normally do it. We know not to do that. And also there's a kind of tightening and a leaning in from the group. And then very often, particularly with family stories, at the end, it's released with laughter. And then we're back to our more individual social activity where we talk in pairs rather than one person holding the whole group. So both the skills and the event are things that we are adept in already. The problem is we don't know we are. And this is the challenge. Because if we're going to go from, hey, it just happens, it's cool, and we love it, and wow, you can't use it because it appears when it wants to. In order to get to a position where we can consciously use stories, there's the lumpy middle stage to go through. And that's where you need someone to help you. And there's only there are two things you need to know. What are the storytelling tools that I need to master? And number two is, how do I practice? Once you've got those two things, you can make it happen. Okay, good. I'm going to invite you now to use the chat. You might be getting curious about the potential uses of storytelling. So I would like you to make a suggestion or ask a question about how can I use story for this? For example, it could be super general, like how can I use storytelling to do better presentations? That's a bit of a banal example, but it's super general, and you can be general like that if you want, or you can be super specific with a question like, I don't know, like, how can I use storytelling to keep my team on track, to keep my team focused, if that's an issue for you right now. And it's be really good if you can keep it embedded in your reality. So try and approach a genuine issue that you feel free to mention in the chat. to contextualize it, just to see the variety of what we can work with.
Can I ask a question?
Of course you can.
I saw something about a year or more ago now. It was a report, and it surprised me. And in a nutshell, it said that when people read a book, some people actually visualize the scene and what's going on as they're reading. And I do this, and I thought everybody did it. But apparently only about 60% of the population does. The other 40% just read the words and they don't visualize mentally. So how do you, if you're trying to get something across through a story, I mean, people who know me know I tell stories all the time. They have trouble shutting me up sometimes. Jane will tell you. But if you are up against 40% of people who do not visualize when you're telling them something, can your story make the same impact or have the same impact with them as it does with people who, like me and perhaps everybody here, I don't know, do visualize?
Definitely, because they might not have your visual acuity, but they'll compensate in other ways. So, for example, they might have a clearer idea of what it sounds like. They might also have a very strong kinesthetic sense of how things feel. And their appreciation of the story will parallel exactly the way they see the world. So you might have Technicolor in your world. So when your stories will be Technicolor. Other people might have a much more subtle oral kind of sensibility or a more kinesthetic feeling. So we turn the story into our world version of the story always. So just don't worry about it, because they're a fully functioning human being. You can just trust that they've got it.
Right. Okay.
But it does show you actually how we can be shoved off kilter a bit by information and knowledge and facts, or facts. I'm not quite sure how much of a fact this is, how you actually quantify visual versus oral. What's the unit that you would use in order to make that percentage? I've no idea. But that fact was enough to make you doubt that other people, to actually think, to turn it into a problem, that other people might not get the story, and then every fifth thing must be visual or to do with sound or just to tell the story. It's a multi-track, multi-dimensional medium. People will take from it what they actually need in order to create the reality of the story, because it's not just memory, it's experience, and it's not just facts, it's experience. So what we're giving from the teller to the audience is the experience, and you reinterpret it, or the listener reinterprets it to make their own version of it. That's how it works.
Right.
So don't worry.
Won't stop me.
It won't stop you. Nothing will stop you.
But it's funny because I mean, over the years, I mean, I talk too much, but I've told stories about when we've been to India or wherever we've been, and we've done a trip here and done there. And after, some people said, "Oh, I was there with you. I could see it all as you were saying." And other people haven't. And I thought, well, perhaps they're just shy to speak. But I wonder now if it is because some people do, so build these visual images, if you like, in their brain. They can, as sort of we're describing things, or I'm describing things, they're actually building the picture in their heads, where other people aren't. I would just wonder if it had more of an impact with it being a visual, with it being a picture as opposed to being words. You don't have to answer. That's right. Just me.
No, I think that's a very interesting question. Just words, because it's not just words when we're telling stories. And thank you for saying that, because it's actually something I had not put on my list to talk about. It's really important, because when we are telling a story, it's often embodied, and it's often embodied a lot. So, for example, there are various modes in storytelling. The most kind of clear mode is information. And the quality of information needs to be clear in order for us to understand, in order for us to have the context. So for example, there's a Scottish folk story I tell a lot, and it starts off like this. Once was a boy called Jack. Jack lived in a cottage with his mother down by the sea. Every day, Jack would get up bright and early. He'd go down to the sea. He'd sit on a rock and he'd sit there and he'd listen to the sound of the sea. He'd listen to the sound of the seabirds crying above his head. And he listened to the most beautiful singing he'd ever heard. And so it went on day after day. Nothing has happened. This is just the context. So here we have clarity. Here we have the most factual type of storytelling you can possibly give, but still you're receiving it you're remaking the world with sensations, with I don't know how many of you felt a sea breeze just then.
I was going to ask the same question. How many people built that movie in their heads as you were describing it?
Yeah.
You know, it'd be interesting.
But and it's not just the words. I have told that story so often, it's now part of my experience. In fact, my brain doesn't know the difference between the story of Jack and the Mermaid, which that is the introduction to, and reality. The only reason that I can work out that Jack isn't real and the mermaid isn't real is that I have a frame around it which says story. Otherwise, I would treat it as real, which is what we're doing now. As soon as you launch into the story, it's taken as reality or a reality. We have got some questions in the chat. Storytelling for sales. I've got to come up. Actually, no, I'm going to say something, and then I do sales, but I'm not great at it. It's not my forte. So I'm going to say something, and then I'm just going to open the floor to see if anyone else has got some ideas as well. For me, storytelling for sales would be about the future you. So it's future storytelling. So in X months, stroke years, after having done this program thing, whatever it is, you will be able to do these things. You will be in this place, wearing these clothes, driving this car, I don't know, whatever it is, feeling this level of satisfaction. Or you could choose not to do it. So there's one very simple, I have to make a choice now. The story is actually in the future, not in the past, but it's still a story. So that's just my attempt to answer that question. So the question again is, how can I use storytelling to gather more engagement? Sorry, no. So yes, how can I use storytelling to gather more engagement on social media or with sales? I talked about sales there. Anyone got any ideas? Any contributions?
I really like that idea though of selling why this is a good idea for you. As in the future, like how is this going to have a positive impact on you or your business? So thank you, that was a good answer.
Yeah, I think
thank you, Stephanie.
What you did there is that you put people in the mindset as if they've already made a decision, which is, you know, the whole point of sales, isn't it? It's actually making them make the decision before they've actually realised they've done it, and then you offer them the way out, but in which case they probably won't want to back out if it's actually what they want because you've already made them at ease with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's a kind of future story, and also you cast your potential client as protagonist. Right. And if they are the protagonist, they have power. They have a decision to make, and it's either one or the other. Either decision is a decision. It's both. You know, who knows? But there's a point where they actually have to go, no, I'm going this way. And certainly with me, my buying behavior is not quite like that. I need to be given that same choice several times. So, you know, a bit of dithering is part of the process, but you making the offer has to be super clear. So you feel like it's yes or no. In fact, no is always maybe, but anyway. Storytelling for heart research, Jane, that's a really, really good one. Don't know. Anyone got any ideas?
do we all do it? But we've all been doing a little bit of this morning, haven't we? I mean, Jason sticks out at me as having told a story about how much his clients have saved as a result of his services. And that's the stories we all tell. I'll tell you what great videos you'll get and how good it'll be for your business if you come with me. With heart research, I mean, the stories for me would be the people who benefited as a result of your research. And again, it's the future, isn't it? I mean, I suppose it's all about the future when you're selling stuff or trying to raise money, but this is the impact you could be having on people's lives if you give money to the British Heart Foundation. We're kind of telling stories about the past, but that could be you. And like the Lamborghini, you know what I mean? It's you were mentioning the car you're going to have, or the health you're going to benefit from as a result of our actions.
Because I always mention as well when I do a presentation about my nephew, that's how I got into the charity. And when I'm telling them the story about my nephew, you can hear a pin drop. And I was thinking, right, I've got them, do you know? And then the facts come later on. But I always start off with the story. And I don't know if that's good to do first, or maybe give them the facts first and then go to the story. But so far I'm doing the story and it seems to be working okay. Okay, great. Where'd you put the story at the moment, Jane? Right at the start. So I introduced myself and then I just put the question of, I'm going to tell you how I got into working for the British Heart Foundation. And then I start with the story then of my nephew who was really severely ill at, when he was 5, and basically he wasn't meant to survive, but he did. And I go through the story of how I lived in Canada and I had the phone call and how I heard about Robert was ill and I had to come home, and basically then went through the story of how he got better and everything. And then I start saying about BHF. So I don't know whether that's the right way, whether I should say the facts first or, yeah. When anyone asks me, should I do this or that? My answer is always do both and see which works. Just experiment. Yeah. But it's, I mean, you gave us a super sketchy version of the story, but we're all touched by it, aren't we? Straight away, we're all touched by it. Emotions, isn't it? Yeah. Yes, exactly, exactly. If there was a way, I mean, that's a super personal story. So, and thank you for telling it and being prepared to tell it in presentations and so on. It's also important to try and, are you specializing in children's heart health? No, we're not. It's all in adults. We do obviously children as well, but it's mostly everyone really. Yeah. If I'm giving to a charity and I can see the efficacy of the money I give, I'm very, very happy to give. So if we can see the end result, so that it's about making people, it's about the happy ending. Yeah. Yeah. So there are trials and tribulation on the way, but if we can get that happy ending arc. There's a thing called the closed loop and the open loop. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, whereby, for example, in sales, you need the loop open. You need your... And then closed. Yes. So the closure, the closure is made by the person buying. That's the closure, but it's their step. Mm. And in a way, it's the same with yours as well, Jane. What's nice about your story, though... Yeah, go on.
I think as humans, we're always trying to find that reason to connect with people on some level. So I think with storytelling, so I work with Cancer Research UK, which obviously are a huge organisation, and they're really focused on coming down to, a local level and being the company that people can associate with. And I think as business people and people that just deal with people every day, that we're always trying to find something to latch onto so that relationship is a lot warmer. So I think if you're telling a story and it's about something that gets someone engaging, then you're more likely to find a connection with that person that you can build on in the future. So for me, the storytelling is about warmth and, facts and figures. I could take or leave them, to be honest with you. But when I hear a good story, or if I hear a testimonial, or if I hear something about someone local, I'm way more likely to engage with that company or that product.
Absolutely. I'm I'm feeling very drawn into this conversation, but I'm going to resist because there are so many really interesting questions in the chat. Najma, you want to use it to portray the work that we do. What is the work? Remind us, please.
Yes, I work for the Office of the Future Generations Commissioner, and she does a lot of public speaking events, so international ones as well. So it's just a case of getting the facts of what the Act is out there to people that aren't, first of all, familiar with Wales, and just the basics, and then the second is the work that we're actually doing. At the moment, I use a lot of stats and stuff like that, but I'm not sure it's as engaging as it could be. So I'm just wondering how storytelling could be used in this instance.
I think the future generations, the whole future generations thing in Wales is really inspirational. My question is, why does it matter? And again, I think we're into future stories here, because it's really, I mean, imagine having we can't do something that will harm future generations. That's the law in our country. That's a massive step. So, so what is this future that the Future Generations Commissioner is commissioning, if you like? So I think for it to be a story, we need to be able to sense it. So what does it feel? What does it look like? What does it sound like? Those kind of specifics. And okay, I'm kind of riffing off the top of my head here, but having worked a lot in schools, that would be the obvious place to go and find out. Get kids to do some creative work around what the future should look like when they're running the country. Which, as we get older, we realize that comes around quicker and quicker. Is that a help, Najma?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great. My pleasure. Thank you. Oh yeah, okay. My favorite thing, tech. Oh, this would be good for me actually, this question, because I'm so tech phobic. Steve, tell us a little bit about how you educate businesses at the moment, and also tell us if you've got a specific frustration. That would be great to hear.
Well, it just generally at the moment, some of the people I talk to currently about app development, they have a particular view, but it's kind of disjointed, ill-informed, and they don't really understand. And you've got to try and break through that to make them say, oh, that's what it does. Oh, that's what it means. So we had a case a couple of weeks ago. We had a conversation with an organization, and myself and my colleague, Bob, we spent ages just openly discussing advantages and things like that, and going through that sort of thing without getting cluttered with, well, this feature's our favorite and all that nonsense. And they were just shocked that we were just so open. So we have a challenge. We have a workshop booked in a couple of weeks' time to deliver information on apps and educate people. And my colleague has downloaded all this stats and all this funky information. It's going to be really riveting to lots of people as they go to sleep. And I'm going to try and think, and I was just writing some notes now, thinking, right, so we've got to do some serious storytelling here. I mean, Bob and I are quite, end up being quite comedic, so I'm sure we can make it quite good fun. But it's the way of, taking the dullness of technology, because it is dull at a certain level, not blinding them with science, but actually making it relevant to, as you quite rightly say, their future businesses. That was really key, actually. I hadn't really added that up until you said it, and so I'm really grateful for that. And I'll be working. You've set me on my path for this afternoon. Now I'll be writing out all this nonsense. But I mean, I have seen it and I've witnessed it. In a particular subject in IT is Google My Business, which is for like search engines for, and it can be extremely dull. I mean, I went on so many webinars last year over it. But there's one guy, a guy by the name of Greg Gifford. Every presentation he does is about 20 minutes, and it's all has a theme, and he's a big movie fan. So he delivered Google My Business using Bond references. Every slide had a Bond scene in it, reference in it, and they were just amazing. You listened, you stuck with it, whereas you get some of the other people that know their stuff, but you instant blah 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 blah. Okay, I've just lost another hour of my life. So I think that whole thing, putting people in the future. So when we're going to open that workshop, the first thing I'm going to think about is you all got apps. You all got the app you wanted, and then work my way back round. I think that's how I probably will try and get them into actually owning that app immediately we start.
Great. I think you just answered your own question, Steve, much better than I could.
Does that seem?
No, absolutely. I mean, I really like your, what's his name, Greg Gifford, the Bond fan.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But he has this very specific niche knowledge. He knows where to find those scenes because he knows the films already.
Yeah, I mean, he does Bond, Star Wars, Star Trek, absolutely every presentation. Right. Basically, I seek him out in these conferences just because it's interesting and his information is really, really good, but it's entertaining.
That's it. That's the combination of making the information entertaining, so that I think one of the difference between facts and story is that you understand facts, but you get story. And that is the difference. And if you can do that, you've got them really, and they can, you can then have a proper conversation. Because I do know that I do really resonate with that feeling, Steve, of being in a presentation and you just feel all your synapses unlocking, and you can't make sense of it. And of course, the only person who isn't aware of what's going on is the person giving the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's say technology, and I'm sure we've all been on some webinar, someone telling us about the latest thing and with software or web platform or whatever it is. And, how many people here have lasted 15 minutes before they've glazed over?
But Steve, I think the really interesting thing about technology is that it's not boring. If you look at people who've sold it well, I mean, Steve Jobs is a classic example. Yeah. He didn't invent the iPod. The guy that invented the iPod, a company called Creative, I think it was also in California, they invented an MP3 player and they marketed it. Look, we got this MP3 player. Isn't that amazing? At which point everyone glazes over and what you want about. Steve Jobs copied this idea, called it the iPod, and said, you can have 1,000 songs in your pocket. And that is storytelling. And that is, he visualized the future, and he did that. He created a quasi-religion with people queuing up to spend huge amounts of money on overpriced phones. But it's because he knew how his product interfaced with things. And all those dull Google products you're talking about, they're not dull, and they can revolutionize our businesses if we manage to get to the top of it. But you need to tell people, not Google Analytics, it's fab, look at these stats. It's, the end, as you were rightly saying, the end story. And people like, if you watch people like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, these big Google events they have where they, like, these chief execs come on like rock stars and tell you about their latest ideas, but they're telling stories, and they're fantastic storytellers. And they're not only have great stories to tell, they tell them very well. So.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, thanks, Nick. There's Amanda, can I use storytelling when emailing to gain a new connection? Isn't that what a nurture sequence is? Would that be the same thing?
So what? Sorry.
I mean, are you talking to someone new, or are they signing up for your email list?
New.
Can you give me a bit more context?
No, I just think it's when you're trying to get new connections in work, your introductions are quite dull. And I think often then, if it was me, I probably wouldn't reply. So I was just wondering how you can sort of bring a bit of storytelling into a cold email, really, just to be that little bit, like you said, stand out from the crowd.
No, it is really hard. It's a balance, isn't it? Because you don't want to come over as kind of false and wacky. Hey, do you like bananas? I love bananas. I made my banana cake today. You're like, oh, delete. You're a loony.
That sounds just like me.
I just think that's there is an awkwardness to that moment, and that's what it is. I think there are other ways of showing your humanity than in the words. So, for example, on my Storytelling for Business website, all the pictures are of Welsh landscapes and people walking through them. What's that got to do with my job? Nothing, but it's got everything to do with me. So when people see these pictures, they get me. So if you have, for example, at the bottom of your email, where you stick your address, if you had an image and a logo that was really about you, so your big banana cake, for example, fresh out the oven, that would be you. People go, oh, nice, this is the banana cake woman. Or whatever it is. So when people see, on all the images I post, I took. So I don't use stock images because they're all rubbish. But so when I put up an image, it's 100% authentic and it's 100% me. So it's a little kind of, it doesn't say much, but it says, oh, this is the kind of guy who walks in the countryside and takes pictures. But so, yeah, I think there is a kind of slightly cringy first date feel sometimes with those initial contacts. But I think when people sign up for your emailing list, there's a real opportunity to do some storytelling with your nurture sequence and giving value and making them feel like they know you in those first few automated emails. Andrew, testimonials. Anyone got some help for Andrew? It's in the chat, his question. I put testimonials on our website and people tell how we've helped them. How can this be developed? It's a good question.
I suppose you could respond to the testimonials. So as well as putting the testimonials, you could put something as to how that came about and, what shape that took, and so because I think testimonials always tend to be that you're putting up stories that everyone's amazing and you just think it's almost like a fake perception because not everything's amazing. But I think if you quantified it and said, we really enjoyed working with this client, and when we started we were at this point, when we finished we were at this point, we're looking forward to working together, then I think it seems more of a journey than I'll just put the positive bits up, so it's much more natural to show a two-way relationship, possibly.
Yeah, no, great, Amanda. I think it's a great idea.
I think they usually come about, if they're genuine, they're the end of a dialogue, aren't they? Or part of a dialogue where you've been working with that customer, and the sort of stuff that we put on our website, it tells the story of what we've done for that customer, what the kind of work was and what it meant for them, and then they've said something nice, but it's got to be something more than just saying nice words that are bland and meaningless, but it's how it really helped them. And they're the ones that I think are of value. But if there's anything else that can be done to jazz it up a bit, that would be good.
I think from my own experience with people putting testimonials on websites and stuff like that, we're all a bit blind to them. We don't really pay an awful lot because so many people have done so many bad ones and fake ones and stuff, so we don't always value them. If you've got more conversation, more story in it, as in the approach was this fixed a problem, here's a testimonial how I fixed that problem, and then you have more elements of the story that you got from where they were to where they got, and the problem is solved, I think that has more weight to it than just a review or a thing. I mean, they have value, but generally speaking, they don't always have perhaps the impact that they would have done a few years ago, because everyone's looking for more rich content, they want a solution that's based on where they are, maybe. So if you can answer the question that someone else is asking, and then they read the story, then they're more likely to act upon that, aren't they?
Indeed. Yeah, thanks for that, Steve. So, sorry, Jason, go on.
Yeah, when I used to run my own company, I never used to call it a testimonial. I used to call it an open book. And I always used to tell a story regarding an open book. So I took on your house removal, or I looked after your business. One thing I ask for you when I take the business on is if a customer phoned and wants to know about the journey and what I've done for you, would that be acceptable? And I would tell it up front. So when I took the business on, they knew it's somebody or one of my customers from my open book. They wanted a testimonial on any customer in my book, because I would set up prior to the start before I took the business on, if you can understand what I'm saying. So I would set preempting what I wanted at the end.
Great. Thanks, Jason. I can't quite believe where the time's gone. We've only got 3 minutes left. I want to finish on time. I want to draw your attention to some of the links I've put in the chat, particularly Annette Simmons and Jeff Mead. Annette is the goddess of organizational storytelling, and she talks about the different types of story that you can tell. And I just want to tell a type of story that she recommends, which is the values in action story. She has got about half a dozen types of stories that we really should have under our belt. And the values in action story tells you, it's a story about when you did the thing that you should have done, even though it actually probably wasn't advantageous to you in that moment. So, very quick version of the story. I saw an ad from the BBC. They were looking for someone to work with them, working with adults who wanted to write books for children, but had never written anything before. And there were half a dozen of them, and they were going to film the process, and then there would be an event at the end, and the book would be published. So I applied, and I got an interview. So I went to the BBC in Llandaff, went to this little office, and we sat down. It was all very nice and chatty. And I also knew who else was up for it. I wasn't quite sure I was going to get this, because there were at the time I'd not published anything, and I knew at least one person was a proper published author. So I thought, hey, I'll just go along and see what happens. So we're chatting about this and that, and I was talking about the techniques and tools that I use to get to generate stories from children and from adults, and it was all going very well. And then one of the producers says, well, you see, the thing is, this is television, Michael. Well, what you have to understand is that we need jeopardy. Okay, fine. So this is what we'd want to do. So we've got a 5-week series, 6-week series. In week 4, what we want to do is we will tell the group that actually they don't have what they thought was 4 weeks. They've only got 2 weeks left. Then we put in jeopardy, and people will be glued to the screens. And I said, under no circumstances will I agree to do such a thing, because you've asked me to take a role where there is trust between me and the participants. And if I start the process knowing that I'm deliberately going to trip them up, that is a serious act of bad faith. No. And I thought, well, there we are. I feel very noble. I've missed the gig, but hey, went home, got the call, got the gig, yay! So that's a values in action story. And it's a really good one to have, because your values speak louder than words. And if you go to one of her books, I mean, her early book is, I can highly recommend. It's 20 years old. It's still the best. It's called The Story Factor. That'd be really good. So bang on 11:30. Thank you all very much.